What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's Arrow. Today I want to talk about my point 3 plans when I'm going to be playing in the Third Edict and Rise of the Abyssals League. So as many of you know, last league I played Ice Shot Amazon as my league starter. It was absolutely phenomenal and I had a great time. That build is going to see some changes and I will update that guide before league start. But this league I'm going to be playing a Deadeye variant. We'll get into the reasons why I'm going to be playing Deadeye, but first let's talk about what changed in the build. For starters, we have access to the new Snipe, which scales its damage very differently. Previously, Snipe was a guaranteed crit if you had perfect timing. Perfect timing is that small window where you fully charge and release and get all of your extra damage, and then you would just scale crit multi on top of that. So the new Snipe gem says that the explosion is no longer a guaranteed crit, and it doesn't have increased bonus. But the explosion now deals over 1,000 attack damage at gem level 20, previously 343. So we're getting triple base damage, and then we can still scale the critical strike. Before, the guaranteed crit didn't really do anything if you already had really high crit chance, which we will have. And we are also getting a ton of extra radius. It used to be 1.6. It is now 2.8 meters on the explosion from the Snipe. Now, to buff this even further, perfectly timed arrows that hit a frozen or heavy stunned enemy now cause larger explosions that deal much more damage. So according to the launch video, it said that is 100% more damage against unique enemies with a perfectly timed arrow against a frozen enemy, and freezing enemies is going to be trivial. The next skill in the build that I want to talk about is Freezing Salvo, and Freezing Salvo is going to be our catalyst for freezing bosses. It was already very strong before, and it will be even stronger now. For those not familiar, freezing in Path of Exile 2 builds up freeze percent basically with cold hits that you do until you get that freeze, which means small hits are very, very good for freezing too, provided you have a lot of them. Well, Freezing Salvo had a lot of them before, and it's going to have even more now with the addition of ice-tipped arrows / escape shot. These are ways of getting what's called ice fragments. Ice fragments are little blocks of ice that appear on the ground after you use one of these skills that explode after a duration. However, Freezing Salvo can target these little blocks on the ground, getting 1, more shotgunning on enemies, and 2, more opportunities for hits to freeze. In my experience with playing with Freezing Salvo, when you set it up to freeze enemies, it does it very, very easily. It's going to be even better at it this patch. So how I'm imagining the playstyle, you will use probably Escape Shot, then Freezing Salvo. That should freeze the boss, which will give you time to use a perfect window Snipe. That Snipe should do a massive amount of damage, at which case you will then reposition, use your Freezing Salvo, use your Escape Shot, put the fragments on the ground, Freezing Salvo the boss, and freeze them again. This should be the best single target we've had available to us on a cold bow skill, and I'm very much looking forward to using it. One of the problems that people have with Snipe is that it can be difficult to use against bosses that are moving around, etc. But in this build, you will only be sniping enemies that are frozen, making it much, much easier to hit. Freezing Salvo is also going to be amazing for leveling, but we will get to that in a little bit. So yet another buff that the build is seeing is less mana cost in the endgame. Marcus said that mana cost after level 20 will be significantly lowered. Right here, according to the skill changes page, the mana cost growth of all skills has been rebalanced. Generally speaking, skills will have similar mana costs at low gem levels, which is fine, and potentially slightly higher mana costs at some intermediate levels, but lower and sometimes dramatically lower at gem levels higher than 20. Now, one of the biggest ways to scale damage in Path of Exile is gem levels, and that is attacks and spells alike. But the huge cost of doing so is the mana cost that was associated with it. So we don't know what the actual numbers are, but Aisha already wasn't that bad with mana cost, but now you can feel free to scale those levels even higher. So why am I playing Deadeye? Deadeye has been once again buffed inexplicably and is now, in my opinion, the best ascendancy in Path of Exile 2. There are a couple of changes here that I'll go through, but I'll talk about why these are exciting for this build. The Avidity Notable no longer grants chance to gain maximum frenzy charges, but instead gives a 50% chance to gain an additional frenzy. That's fine. We're not going to be taking this node anyway, so this change is not super important. However, we will be taking the next 2 nodes that we talk about, Called Shots and Eagle Eyes. Called Shots no longer is just apply an additional mark, which was not very good. Instead, it causes your projectiles to chain 2 marked enemies and grants the new Called Shots meta skill that repeatedly marks enemies near you, bypassing your mark limit. So let's first talk about this chaining. This is really, really cool because the marks will be randomly going out to enemies around you. When you hit other enemies, it will chain to those enemies that are marked. Now, it's possible to have multiple marked enemies in a pack because the Called Shots meta skill will repeatedly mark enemies near you. It doesn't say anything about rares or uniques or prioritization, which would be nice if it had that, but if it doesn't, that'll be fine too. And this will help our clear significantly. Chain on Ice Shot feels amazing. So just that on its own is fantastic. However, the real meat here, the new Called Shots meta skill, repeatedly marking enemies bypassing your mark limit. This gives you access to multiple marks with no effort, which means a lot of power. So let's talk about what we are probably going to be using. Number one, Sniper's Mark. Sniper's Mark is going to give us a frenzy charge when we consume the mark. You consume the mark by critting an enemy, so the next critical hit has extra bonus damage. That's what you get from Sniper's Mark. But then it is also going to give us a frenzy charge. Those frenzy charges are going to be generating constantly because we're going to be marking enemies constantly. That means our barrage for snipe will have really good uptime, resulting in a lot more damage. Next, we're going to be using Freezing Mark. Freezing marks is mark a target, making them more susceptible to being frozen. This is super important for our Freezing Salvo and really important for our snipe. We want enemies to be frozen, and being able to use Freezing Mark and Sniper's Mark on the same enemy is massive. But also, for clear, when the marked target dies, a cold nova erupts from their corpse. This nova can proc Herald of Ice. Herald of Ice, in combination with Freezing Mark, feels really good. So depending on how fast these marks are going out, this might make the clear insane. So it does its own damage. It's got more freeze buildup, really strong. And then Voltaic Mark, I'm thinking about using as well. Depending on how often it's casting the marks, I don't want to use too many of these if it's going to cost too much mana or too much spirit. But if it's reasonable to do, using the Voltaic Mark as well and then getting lightning damage from sources like your ring and your bow is going to allow you to shock enemies and do extra damage. And then also, this will cause even more explosions. The mark makes it so you are more likely to shock the marked target, but then the explosion has a more chance to shock enemies around it. Because the enemies that are getting marked are not necessarily the rare in a pack, it may put a mark on a mob near the strongest enemy in the pack, and then when that target dies, it explodes and shocks the main target, which is the rare. So depending on how many of these we can get away with using, Sniper's Mark number 1, Freezing Mark 2, and Voltaic at number 3. Bloodhound's Mark is just for bleed builds and it has nothing to do with us. So Called Shots is insane. The next node is also insane. Eagle Eye's notable passive skill no longer removes the distance-based accuracy penalty. Instead, it applies 20 stacks of critical weakness to enemies when you consume a mark. So you have a boss. Called Shots is going to be automatically putting all of your marks onto the bosses. Again, I don't know what the uptime looks like, but when you crit a boss that has Sniper's Mark on them, it will consume that mark. That mark will put critical weakness onto the boss and give you 10 additional base crit. For reference, a very good bow can have somewhere between 7 and 10 crit on it, which means you are effectively more than doubling your base crit. If you have 300% increased critical strike chance, that 10% becomes 40%. I would argue that this is actually a better crit node than the Amazon's crit node. One, it's been nerfed, but also you don't have to invest into this. Amazon requires you to put a lot of investment into accuracy, which very quickly becomes useless once you hit 100% accuracy rating. So all that extra accuracy is just to get you some attack speed from the tree and the crit. But Eagle Eyes doesn't require you to do anything. The marks are already going out automatically, and you get 10 base crit. To me, Deadeye is easily the number 1 softcore ascendancy, and I'm very much looking forward to playing it. So lastly, let's talk about leveling. Why am I excited to level with cold bows? Well, there's a couple reasons. Number 1, Escape Shot has been buffed. Escape Shot now puts ice fragments on the ground that after you use it, a duration will go by and those fragments will explode. This makes it so you can use Escape Shot as a way to blow up packs. But Escape Shot also is very likely to freeze enemies, which allows them to shatter easier, which makes Herald of Ice more effective on your clear. But it also enables the Freezing Salvo. The new Freezing Salvo targets any ice fragments that you have on the ground, and you'll be creating those with Escape Shot. So why is this so exciting? Well, before, there was really no great way to level with cold bows, but now we have from level 14, the Salvo and Escape Shot combo. You're very likely going to be able to Escape Shot and Salvo a pack and immediately blow it up. So before you can get to Ice Shot, you have a way of scaling some serious damage. Now here's the key. Previously, Freezing Salvo was not very strong in campaign because you have to wait until it accumulates all of its missiles and then you use it and then it doesn't become useful again for another 6 or 8 seconds. However, because the new Freezing Salvo always targets any ice fragments that you have in that area, you can use it repeatedly and whatever missiles have charged up are just bonus. You're going to get a shotgunning effect just from having ice fragments on the ground. So the more you have, the better. Maybe using ice tipped arrows will be the move, but early on, I really think that Escape Shot and Freezing Salvo are going to be a very potent combo. So rather than wait to use your Freezing Salvo after 6 or 8 seconds, you're going to have a guaranteed base of, say, 5 or 6 fragments that are on the ground from your escape shot that you will get to target with your Freezing Salvo. I think this 1-2 punch is going to really, really be nice for clear until you get Ice Shot at level 31. Now, keep in mind, you get Snipe at level 6, so you'll be able to use Snipe right away, freeze bosses, and potentially do some massive damage to them. So that is going to be it for me. I am super, super excited about this league start. Let me know down in the comments what you are planning to play for this league start. And make sure you stop by my Twitch, twitch.tv/AER0__. I'm live every single day. So stop by and drop that Twitch Prime. I appreciate each and every single one of you. Thank you for watching. And as always, take care.